Okay, I think we're good. I'm doing this. I just saw me laughing. Everybody's going to get your dum-ba-dum. Nice. How is everybody this evening? Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Yann's going to sound like a robot, so let's...
Meep, mop, meep, meep, mop.
Yeah, one day
I am a robot.
I'll get that right. Good evening, everybody.
I'm
As
still blurry.
smooth
Why am I
as
still
always.
blurry?
You need better pixels. Does anybody know where you can get some good, some of the good pixels?
This conversation has taken a weird turn. Hello, Gerard. Hello, Roderick. Hello, Blurry Yann. I don't feel blurry. I do feel blurry, but I've just had some coffee, so I should be okay.
It actually blends into what we want to talk about this evening.
Oh, nice.
Because, as soon as 8-bit came in, I thought, well, controlling your character has been tight for many, many, many years. So it's not modern hardware that has improved things over time, because I remember playing Mario, when you push that button, you could get some of those jumps pixel perfect.
But okay, let's start a little bit.
We've dived
Why
straight
are we
in.
talking about this? We've played 2 games in the past couple of weeks. We've played a couple of games of Payday 2, which we talked about last week. In fact, we played that a couple of weeks running.
Yeah.
And then a couple of days ago, we tried multiplayer Gotham Knights. And they both feel like they have control problems that lead to the same problem for different reasons. So we thought it'd be fun to talk about. Before we go to that, Mikey, what did you think of Gotham Knights? Since I finally dragged you into it.
It's interesting that I, again, picking it apart, overall, I think it's a really good game. I think the story is tight. I think the music, the score is excellent. It goes along with the with it very, very well. But it's incredible that we both came to the same, oh, this is annoying conclusion with some of the controls.
And it's weird because, okay, so Gotham Knight plays in some ways very similar to the Arkham Batman games, right?
Yes,
So,
and I made a direct comparison to that and thought it was the same publisher, or at least
right,
the same
like
development
it's
team.
definitely part of the same mythos, but it's not actually an Arkham Batman game. And there are some key differences to do with like how you do character progressions and stuff like that. But when you get into combat, if at any point you press dodge, no matter what your character's doing, they will immediately dodge out the way.
Yeah.
So if you're halfway through an attack and someone's doing a heavy attack towards you that you just don't want to take,
you can dodge out the way.
You can avoid all of it. You're not animation locked. So there is clearly very fluid animation happening. When you're on the bike, especially if you're on a controller, it's very easy to avoid traffic unless you don't want to, or you're playing multiplayer, in which case Mikey's traffic suddenly appears on your computer and you ram into it because it wasn't there half a frame ago.
One of the things I noticed with...
There's something...
Oh, we got delay as well. Awesome. I was gonna quickly jump in and say that there is something about the control system where if you're trying to make micro movements, your character actually has to have not just the initial impulse. It needs your character almost needs to like get underway before you can actually change direction. There's no micro movement of your character.
Right, and it's okay. Let's talk about the basics of good character movement.
You in a donkey costume or something?
No, I mean my
no, just I'm
yeah.
ass fuzzy.
Yeah, it's not a donkey. I'm just stupid. Okay, when you're designing a character and you look at the movement, there's a few things you want to get right, and one of them is momentum. Right? When you stop moving, you expect your character to not suddenly stop. You expect some inertia to happen. Yeah. But how much inertia and how much control the player has is really difficult to get right. So as an example, we were playing Payday 2 and Michael was saying the stealth missions are really fun, but the controls are really slidey.
Yeah. It felt like you were on ice. You kind of didn't come to a stop. You came to a stop and then you moved a little.
Now, I haven't noticed that during the stealth missions, but I have noticed it during the loud missions where I'm a lot more mobile than I intend to be. I'm trying to like peek out and do a quick shot and peek back, and I've actually just gone halfway across the corridor. So there's too much momentum going on here.
Yeah.
Um, you can have a game with no momentum, right? Something like, and I've not played it, but something like Super Meat Boy, where it's pixel perfect. But that takes away from the realism. If you're halfway through an animation and your character suddenly moves 180 degrees and snaps the other way, that doesn't feel right. So Gotham Knight has this thing where if you're facing left and you just tap to the right on the joypad of the keyboard, they will do the full turn animation, which is interesting because if you're trying to slightly tweak the aim or just look in the right direction or just get away from a ladder, it's actually quite difficult to do. You have to do a
Yeah.
full motion away.
It's interesting because it's almost as if they've tried to get a more realistic effect when it comes to movements, but then you've got the player's desires to take into consideration.
Mm.
If you're this superhero who's really nimble and you're going to be able to dodge out the way instantly, you expect all of the other movements to be that instant. And it's weird. Analyzing it like this, you're like, well, would I want my game to be like that? Do I
Well,
want
because
the
that leads to its own
movement to be
problems, right?
realistic?
Especially when you're doing a lot of because depending on which character you've got, you're going to want to be in the middle of a big crowd of people and just think, I want to go over there, I want to go over there, I want to go over there.
Yeah.
But if we're too precise with the movement, there's no way I'm going to hit somebody. There's a wonderful moment where you're playing as Robin and you've got the bow staff, and Robin's first special ability, his first momentum ability, where you built up enough power, is he twirls the bow staff around him in a
Yeah.
completely pointless way and charges forward. It looks really impressive, does a bunch of damage, and deflects bullets, which is lovely. But Mikey kept missing. He kept sort of twirling past, doing a choo-choo train of death.
There we go.
Most of the time he hit, like it wasn't a huge problem, but every now and again he didn't. And I'm wondering if the controls aren't trying to guess where you're going, and maybe that's the issue.
Well, I realize that I need to understand the game. I've obviously played third person games where you're looking is definitive. That's the way you're going to go. So I start this charge with my character maybe slightly off. I'm looking this way, and so I start the charge, and the character kind of runs that way, and then I have to arc back round. And I think that's my disconnect with the actual
There's
controls
definitely that.
themselves.
I think there's some prediction going on. For those of you who've not played it or seen it or played the Arkham games, you have a grappling hook, especially useful in a big open world city. You can use your bike. Nobody really wants to use the bike. It's not that fast. It's slightly faster than swinging across the city. Swinging across the city is manifestly more fun.
Definitely.
However, clearly, if we make a game where we have to put full collision on every aspect of every piece of building, and then you could just aim a thing at it, that's going to massively slow the thing down. So what we're going to do is we're going to put big box gliders around things, and we're going to put snap points where you can attach to.
Yeah.
Every now and again, your character won't go the direction you think they're going to go. They're going to go up.
And up,
And
and up, and
most
up.
of the time that doesn't happen. But every now and again it does. And you're like, I didn't want to go that way. Mikey, we were trying to figure out what's faster, the bike
Yeah.
or grappling. And Mikey just kept going in the wrong direction.
Well, I was near the cathedral, and I latched onto the cathedral, and I was looking at another part, and I wasn't waiting for the reticule to aim because it had been so consistent at the lower city. But the moment I reached the cathedral, it kept targeting something completely off my screen, and I just went up and up and up. I was like, I don't think I'm going to catch up with you, Yann, because I'm now at the top of the cathedral.
When you sort of get a feel for this system, and it does feel a bit vibe based, which is interesting because you'd expect it to be more precise than that. But when you get a feel for it, you do get pretty good at, I'm just going to leap in this direction, and by the time I get close to the ground, I'll be able to target something in front of me.
Hopefully. I don't think there's any fall damage in the game. It's very forgiving with that.
When you're about to hit the ground too hard, your character will fire their grapple up and hook on something that you can't see and break their fall, which is nice of them.
Oh, is that what they're doing with the animation? I really couldn't tell.
But I'm wondering if there's a prediction going on there, and it might be the same kind of prediction that's happening in combat, because often in combat, I like to play Nightwing, who's very good in a big group of people, right? Just bouncing around. Doesn't do as much damage as other people, but great crowd control, great, like, drop me in the middle of people and I could just do all kinds of damage. But trying to figure out which one you're actually going to hit next is a bit of a problem. Good news is it doesn't really matter because you'll still do something awesome. So, okay, I can work with that. I'll just keep moving. but it's not as simple as that one's about to fire at me. I should hit him. Hello, Mind
Good
Stammer.
evening, my
Welcome.
stammer. Yeah. I've also finally, for those
Mm.
who are long listeners of the channel, know I like Dying Light, and they know that I'm waiting for it to come on sale, and it came on sale, and so I bought it. And it's interesting that we've come to this, and obviously we've had lots of discussions about control systems anyway. But I realized whilst playing Dying Light 2 that controls, when you're parkouring and being precise everywhere, are really, really important. And I
Mhm.
found myself plenty of times diving, testing. How far can I jump before I can't reach that bit of the roof anymore and fall to my death? Okay.
So let me ask, when you're playing Dying Light, what's the control system you use?
What do you mean?
Well, I have not played it. So is it designed around consoles? Is it around a PC? Do you
It,
use
it,
controller? Do you use mouse? Do
I
you use
I
joystick?
use
Do you
mouse
use
and
a dance
keyboard.
pad? Okay.
I would love to use the dance pad for it. I actually have one. I found it. I just need to know whether it
Very
works.
nice.
So yeah, I used the keyboard and mouse for it. That's just my preferred thing. I have tried it with controller, and it's one of those things where you have to relearn it. I'm like, maybe on my
Well, we had
second
that with Gotham
playthrough.
Knights,
Yeah,
didn't we? Because like I always use the controller, like, oh, does that work? And you plug it in, it's like, I don't know what any of the buttons do.
and I've already done the tutorial. I will wait again.
Not only that, we got to the very first fight, and Mikey immediately got downed, and he's like, "Can you come get me? I'm going to switch back to keyboard and mouse." I'm
Yeah,
wondering actually if the controller is the reason why it's not that precise.
possibly with dead zones and things like that. I mean, being
Well, you've got to program around the fact that it's actually very hard to be precise with these things.
yeah, definitely. So what I was going to say with Dying Light is the movement they've really nailed with Dying Light 2. You could jump around and you feel like you're learning parkour as you go because you open up new skills, new abilities to drop from height and then roll so you don't take as much damage. Little things like that you learn as you go, and that's a great way of building up your skills and your abilities, and you do feel like you're really progressing through the game. But the combat,
Mm.
I did my version of raging, and I don't do this that often. I'm chill, and I actually swore at the computer. Good evening, Colin.
Hello, Todd. Hello, Colin.
Um,
Hello,
so
Cat.
I jumped into this group of people. I was like, yeah, I can take you guys on. Hello, and everything I was swinging and I was trying to dodge, and I just couldn't get it right, and it felt sluggish, slow, and I think part of that was my perception because I played so much of the first one. I was so good by the end of that one. I've started off afresh in this one, and you end up with your character not being as nimble or not being as good. And man, I just swore at the computer. Took a step
So here's
back
a
and a
question.
breather.
You played Shadows of Mordor, right?
Yes.
Which is a very similar system, and in fact, the same publishing studio. And I imagine some of the same devs because it did feel like Lord of the Batman rings. Um, did
Listen,
Gotham Knights feel more or less? And I know we didn't actually reinstall it to compare it, but more or less tight, for want of better words.
so Shadow of Mordor, which is the one I have played, I really, really enjoyed that. A little bit of a side story here. When I played that, I did all the side missions. I only thought there was one zone, so I went around everywhere and woohoo!
Yep.
Second zone, I'd already maxed out the tech tree or whatever you want, the ability tree. I'm like, this is going to be easy. And one of the things I used to do was go around all the fort or wherever uh, the boss. What are they called? The trolls,
Orcs.
orcs. That's the one. I don't know.
Urukai.
The orc. Isn't that from a different? Anyway, so the orcs,
No, it's
the leader.
from Urukai is that's what they are. They're
Okay,
Urukai.
so I run around and I gather them all together, and then I would fight them en masse. I don't feel like I can do that at all in Arkham Knights. So the control system there was very, very tight. You actually locked onto a character. It reminded me very much of Assassin's Creed in terms of your ability to target one
Right.
person, do something, move,
I
attack.
guess that's kind of the reason why we're sort of going around in circles here, because there's something nebulously like wading through treacle slash molasses, depending what part of the world you're from,
Yes.
in Arkham Knights, where it's perfectly fun and the writing is amazing, the voice acting is on point, and even like the little random text messages and things you can find in the world are worth reading, like genuinely worth reading, often very funny. The cutscenes are amazing, which is not something I say about games, right? I normally like saying to the computer, can I play now?
Yeah.
Um, but there's something about the movement that feels very sluggish. It feels like your character's sedated.
And of course, maybe it's, but you've been through the entire game. I haven't. My first thought when I started playing was maybe my character's not developed yet, and therefore I can't run quickly, or I can't jump far, or I can't do X, Y ability.
But it's not so much run quickly and jump far because you can leap off buildings,
Uh,
travel 70 feet,
yeah.
and then grapple someone and land on them. Like clearly you're inhuman.
One of the things that I thought they could
But you
really
can't
improve on,
turn.
yeah, exactly, turning was a problem. So I'm trying to go into the very early on during the tutorial. You go to the morgue in order to get something. I
You
wasn't
break
paying
into the
attention,
police station, right?
and I'm next to the door I want to open, but I'm not looking directly at the door because as I've run at the door, I've done something with the controls, or I've hit the door and my character's turned sideways, and then I'm like beep beep beep,
I had that.
and
Okay,
then I
so
can open the door.
you can't play multiplayer till you finish that mission,
Yeah.
which we didn't realize at the time, but it doesn't take long, so fine, whatever. The mission that I can join him in, and joining was a cinch, by the way. If we're
It,
both
w- it
friends on Steam, it's like Mikey's playing and his game is open. All right, I'm joining. Um,
it was sad to see that you can't have 4-player though, since there are 4
no, they are adding
characters.
another mode.
Ooh.
Um,
Anyway,
but weirdly, the very first mission we did together, I got stuck on a ladder just like he had. And it was like I'm in the middle of a fight. I don't really want to be making friends with ladders right now. Like I'm not worried. I'm massively over leveled for this, but um, I don't know. It's interesting because it feels like nail the feeling of a character's movement, and it almost doesn't matter what the graphics are like.
yeah. If the game feels good, it's difficult because we are talking about feelings, and I'm sure even just between us, even though we discovered the same things, we're both going to have different tolerances for what is acceptable when it comes to snappy controls. We've mentioned, was it speedrunners before? 2D
Mm.
racing, superhero running around, and it is so much fun. But the reason why it's so much fun is because when you do something, it gets done. There's no
It's done
delay.
immediately.
If you
If
need
you
to
miss a
change
jump,
direction,
you missed it.
yeah,
Mhm. Which feels fair, right? It's very hard, and the skill ceiling is insane in that game.
yes,
But when you're playing against people roughly the same skill level, it's utterly fair. I missed that jump. I'm going to lose.
yeah,
As opposed to, why did you go this way? Okay, so there's two scenes in Gotham Knights that I got really frustrated with. And they're both kind of the same thing, but with a different twist. And I'm not going to spoil exactly what happens, but I'm going to say, Mikey, you're going to find yourself at the bottom of a tunnel surrounded by bones, and this ancient machinery is going to kick up like old 1960s Batman, full of twirly blades and flames and rolly things, and you've got to get through it perfectly with this control system.
that's going to be fun.
Oh my god! It took me 20 minutes. I was so mad. I was shouting at the screen, "Why is this fun for anybody?" Like the control system just isn't precise enough for that.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering why it's that forgiving because I don't remember the Arkham games being like that.
Yeah. The Ark. I am going to play it again. I installed it earlier today, and my intention was to. But I've been busy. But yeah, my intention was to play it just in prep for talking about it. But I seem to remember the original Batman Arkham Knight. I think it was called. That was quite tight when it came to combat. I know the next one
Admittedly,
afterwards was
there
not.
were a lot of differences, right? One, it's a long time ago. Two, it was a very small closed area.
Yes, it felt big.
Like it wasn't designed with open world movement in mind. Each section was a set piece, so separated by tunnels and airways. So they could actually just drop that out of memory and move to here.
Yeah.
Here, the levels are quite large. Like we did the first big mission where you have to go see Harley because she's got some information for you. By the way, how'd you like Harley Quinn in that?
Awesome.
That was a fun scene. Like, I also like that every time I played that, this is my third time playing it because I managed to delete my save once. I played with a different character, and she seems to have a different relationship with each of them.
Yes, you said that because you were in my game. She doesn't like Robin at all,
At all.
but
She has
tried to
no time
chat
for
up
him.
Nightbird, Nightwing.
Nightbird? No, Red Hood.
I don't know. Hi, Jelly.
Um, we've
So
been playing Gotham Knights, but
yeah,
we're comparing it to the first Batman Arkham. Although, quick point of trivia, and Mikey knows the answer for this. So ask us in chat, what is the greatest Batman movie of all time?
I do know this.
I'll give you a little time to type that in while we keep talking. There is a correct answer to this. I don't answer questions that don't have correct answers. I do. There is a manifestly correct answer to this.
And you'll love it.
I don't know. I think it's fascinating because everything about this game vastly superseded my expectations, with the exception of the controls. The controls are fine, like just fine. Everything else about the game is excellent as far as I'm concerned. Like, I'm not somebody who just goes in and buys random cosmetic DLC for huge amounts of money, but this game, I was like, you know what? They kind of earned the extra $20 from me. I'm going to buy that skin I'm never going to use. Like, kudos. This game kind of deserved it. I don't care what kids are saying about, it's buggy. I'm playing it on Steam. It crashes for me on Linux. It crashes for me sometimes, but it's still really good.
We've got Batman 89. I actually remember that one quite
Batman
well.
89 was solid, but not the correct answer. The correct answer is the Lego Batman movie, which is, and I kid you not, an actual work of genius. Like, it's just very good.
I do like the that there's kind of a rock metal theme for Batman as well, and I love.
Who's the Batman?
Yes.
Yeah. It's amazing. I found it on Spotify today. So yeah, I think it's fascinating because if you don't pay attention to the controls, if you get rid of inertia, if you get rid of animation lock, so you can't do X while you're doing Y, like you can't change direction when you're doing a backflip, for example, or you can't turn while you're falling, or whatever your game has, the controls feel very unnatural. It can be perfectly fun, but it feels very unnatural.
That's very interesting because I would, if I was looking at a game being played, that's different to playing the game. So sometimes if you're watching a playthrough and someone's jumped up in the air and then they turn 90 degrees and attack someone, they do a physically impossible move. But my word, when you're actually playing a game and you can pull off moves like that, you feel pretty badass. You feel like
you do. You feel like a very naughty donkey.
But yeah, you know what I mean? But it's one of those things how the player feels about the controls themselves. And I mean, it varies all the way from obviously we're talking about a 3D game here where an enemy can be high, low, etc., and all around you. And in 2D, it's just as important to get that game feel right. And whether you're moving a little capsule around at the very beginning, that bit should feel tight. It should feel how you want it to be.
Footage of Super Meat Boy, the character seems to react to how the movement's going. And by that, I mean, like, and I haven't played it, but from what I remember, the actual sprite moves depending on what's happening. Not the location of the screen, but like how it's leaning and how it's following through. There's a sense of momentum there, right? There's a reason why you suddenly stop. I guess when you've got a bunch of very complicated animations, especially something like Gotham Knights or Arkham, where there's so many weird backflips and combats and like little dances that happen and, just so much going on at any given time. And you've got to be able to move through this animation tree in a very fluid way. And the fluidity is key. That when it takes longer than you expect to do a simple thing, you really feel it.
Yeah.
Whereas when I'm halfway through a back kick and then somebody comes charging me with a shield and I press dodge and the correct animation plays to pull me out of that and move me out of the way without it feeling unnatural, that feels really slick.
It's weird how they got some of that feeling so good and some of it not. Speaking of being able to change your movement incredibly quickly, I had a moment where I just upgraded one of my abilities for parkour in Dying Light 2, and when you vault over something, you get a boost. So
Yeah.
I vaulted over this piece on the rooftop, got my boost, and jumped at the same time. Only there was no more roof.
Mm.
And in that game, you go where physics takes you.
Yep.
And that was, you see, that I wasn't angry at the game for. I felt like that was in 100% my agency. I ran and vaulted off of a roof essentially, and I chuckled because that is funny.
I'm currently thinking of like, because you mentioned speedrunners, which feels very tight, but actually there's a bunch of things in speedrunners where you have a lot less control over, right?
Hmm.
When you're falling, you can grapple. I think you can change how lefty righty you go. I might be wrong on that.
I can't remember the specifics now. It's been a while.
When you slide, you feel like you're sliding. Like you actually get a lot less control over it than you do on something else. I guess I'm struggling because it's such a nebulous feeling, right? It's a vibe. The character feels sluggish. Character clearly isn't sluggish, but feels it.
I suppose if we go back to Mag Racer, so Wipeout-esque game that we were working on a couple of years back, the
Which had an interesting design problem, which I think is going to lead to what you're talking about.
so it didn't feel like it was on rails. It felt like Speedboats in Space Simulator. It felt
Right.
like because it was physics based. If you went into a corner really quick whilst floating, you power slid around the corner essentially.
It was worse than that. I was the only one who could finish a course. Like you could do 2 laps out of 3 comfortably. But I'd spent day in, day out writing this thing because I had written an anti-grav, zero friction, high speed racer where you're going at 800 kilometers an hour.
And
And
one
it
of
turns
the
out that's
things,
really hard.
one of the things that we got from that was to actually ask students to play the game and friends and family to play the game, because it became very apparent things like people were expecting there to be a reverse, and there isn't a reverse on these. They're floating, so you just have to turn and then off you go again. And it's interesting, and I think having your game being tested early on is really, really important when it comes to the movement. Are people getting stuck? Because
But
when you're
again,
writing it yourself,
because with Mag Racer, the feedback we were getting was to do with how it felt, right?
yes.
We then had to translate to see what the issue was. For example, when people take the first corner at speed, they always round into the wall and they're like, the turning doesn't work. Turning works fine, but what's happening is your momentum is still going that way. So you're having to use air brake to slow down here and boost to go that way, which just isn't intuitive for these
No.
games. You're expecting Wipeout, and Wipeout is on rails.
You're
Like you're
glued
at
to the
you're
ground. Yeah.
right. You're controlling a camera where the car is almost incidental. The Witcher control systems and 1 or 2 seemed horrible when Jelly played them. It was only Witcher 3 was able to play, and not sure why. I don't know, because I had such a bad time with The Witcher 3 that I just gave up after the first flashback.
Mm.
There was something about Gerald's voice. And for people who've been watching us for a long time will know my particular hatred of
Have a
dystopian
throat
man
lozenge.
with terrible throat infection trying to save the world while sick. um, it was a time of man flu. I just couldn't get into it. I just couldn't. I know it's a lot of people love this game. Mikey's gone.
Oh, fine.
A lot of people say the writing is amazing. A lot of people say the combat's amazing. It might be. I never got that far. I just couldn't. I also didn't like my autopilot horse.
Autopilot horse. Okay, I'll hold
You
my
get
hand
the
up. Is it?
horse.
I've got Witcher 1, Witcher 2, Witcher 3. Played none of them.
Okay, so you've got this big open world, and it's based on effectively, from what I can tell, the Polish countryside, right? So it's a lot of small villages with lots of countryside in between them, with roads that you can follow.
Yeah.
But turns out, holding W or pressing forward or right trigger for ages while you follow a road just isn't very interesting.
No. I know
Okay.
it's an option in Red Dead Redemption. You can go autopilot for horse.
So if you're on a road,
Yeah.
and you're moving forward, you can let go and the horse will follow the road.
Yeah. Go make a cup of tea.
Right. And all I could think of is, why is Tesla reprogramming my horse? And I just couldn't. From that moment on, I was like, nope, I'm done.
Also horse.
Which is a shame, but I don't know. There's something, those games that a lot of people love, and you start playing it, and you just can't. We had this conversation about movies recently, didn't we? I'm one of the few people I know who doesn't like the original Matrix movie.
Hmm.
I just hate it.
The color
I love
grading in it
Keanu
is
Reeves.
horrible, but yeah.
Well, that's a deliberate choice, which hasn't aged well. But I love Keanu Reeves. I love his work. I think he's a wonderful man. I think he's a very talented actor, especially when he's in Bill and Ted. Also, surprisingly, in John Wick, which I was not expecting. That's a very silly but very enjoyable series of movies. Um, but there's something about the Matrix that just rubs me the wrong way.
There's a new game coming out of Matrix soon, isn't there? Or is
I
that just
don't
a
know.
tech demo
There's a new
for
movie
Unreal?
that came out.
I don't know.
Did you? I'm trying to think games. Oh, I know a game that you should have liked, and everyone likes, and you tried it. Like, no.
Arc.
Uh-huh.
I still don't know why I don't like it. I've tried my best to work out why.
It's like me with Witcher.
Yeah, everything's there. A survival game where you're building stuff. Yeah, that's my jam. Dinosaurs are pretty
Trolling.
cool. Yeah, but there's something about it that just doesn't work for me. I enjoyed Atlas far more than I did Arc, but I didn't like the fact that it wasn't really a single player game.
See, Ark is interesting because the control system in that is very solid, and you don't notice it. Like, it just works.
Yeah.
There are some odd dinosaurs that move in weird ways they have to get used to. That reminds me, the worst culprit for this, GTA.
Yes. Control systems in GTA feel like they've been put together by different departments.
Which one? Because...
Well, I remember the first time I got into a helicopter, I was like, oh, this is an interesting system, because it is one of the games that I will pick up a controller for, but it's hilarious. So when it was must have been about 18 months ago now, the last time Yann and I played a GTA 5, I was using the controller, and then we went out to go do something, so I put the controller down and started using mouse and keyboard. Yep. I got into the helicopter, and Yann's like, take off. And I'm like, I'm just waiting for my controller to start.
That was fun. That was almost as fun as the time when, take off. I think I've lost connection to the server. No! The snapping system in Ark, so Ark's construction system is snap-based.
Yeah.
And if you're not using the Structures Plus mod, the snapping system is painful. It's genuinely painful, because you'll be aiming at exactly the right thing. The green outline will show you where you're going, and you'll press it, and in the act of pressing it, you've moved. So that's annoying.
I don't want a door at that angle. Yeah, Valheim. I've definitely built great structures in Valheim compared to what I could manage in Ark.
I just can't get excited about Valheim. Every time I look at it, it's just like, it feels like I haven't cleaned my glasses.
Maybe you haven't.
It just feels fuzzy.
It has a very bloomy aesthetic. It's very smooth.
Right. It's a visual choice.
Yeah.
There's plenty of games, though, where they clearly have done a lot of work. What's the action MMO set in space where everybody's space ninjas wearing kinky scuba suits?
Answers in the chat, because I can't say anything.
Totally. Swimming in GTA. Swimming in GTA is bad. Swimming onto a boat and then trying to get into the boat is bad.
And then jumping off again.
Because the key for get in boat is the same for dive, which we talked about a few weeks back was a real problem on that heist.
It definitely was.
It was, what is the name of that?
Space Opera. I mean,
it's a fasty shooty ninja game. A very, very shiny aesthetic.
Third person, first person,
third person. It's on my ignore list. It's called.
It's on your ignore list. You have an ignore list.
Steam. Don't tell me about this game. I don't know.
I mean, usually my brain's the one that's dead typically, but yeah, why not? We'll go with brain dead Yann this evening. I genuinely don't know
I
from
mean,
that
okay,
description.
I had trouble falling asleep. I woke up at 4 in the morning for no reason. I got back to sleep at 5:30, and my neighbors apparently decided to have club night at 9 in the morning.
Club
It's
night.
just like, nah.
Nice.
Oh, like, okay, religion is a fine song, but I don't want to hear it. What was
Not
that?
that early in the morning, no.
It felt very much like the old MDK game from the 90s.
Oh, Murder, Death, Kill. I
Yeah.
That was really weird because you wore this giant
Right. That
bike helmet.
aesthetic.
Yeah,
That aesthetic. Everyone's wearing very, very shiny suits with long spiky bits and
sounds like a good night out to me.
yep. Today on Mikey's Adventures at the Rubber Ball.
Don't break me, please.
Was that to me or an excerpt from the show? Moving on. Control
Yeah.
systems. No, that's the wrong phrase.
So one of the
Um,
things you said earlier with Super Meat Boy is it felt like the character itself was separate almost. What the character was doing was separate to the thing you were actually controlling. And I think that might be one of the keys to being able to animate something very fluidly. I mean, one of the things in Payday 2 was it felt like you weren't in the world. It felt like you were moving a capsule around the world, which you probably are. And so it was sliding up and down and around things. You didn't feel like you had a physical
I've never
connection.
felt I had any weight.
Yes. Yeah. Weight and presence in the world itself. And maybe that's why speedrunners feel so tight because the characters, their animation goes with whatever momentum the character actually has.
Mm. Which is interesting because in Payday 2, I typically play characters with no or very light armor. So I'm moving very fast, but it does feel a little bit, it's not floaty.
Mm.
It's kind of the opposite. It's
A
exactly the
lack of
opposite
head
of
bob.
the problem I've got in, well, head bob just makes me dizzy. Uh, it's almost the opposite problem that I've got in Gotham Knights. When I turn in wow, brain. When I turn in Payday 2, it snaps. It's
Yeah.
instant. When I stop, I slide. Very
Yeah.
slightly, but I do slide.
Yeah, I had problems lining up with the ladder because I'd reach the ladder and then I'd move just beyond its activation point.
My favorite is climbing down ladders.
It's a death sentence.
It is. You've got to go just far enough and then turn around and go forward and grab it. Because if you don't, you'll just whee!
So ladders are a very interesting thing. I remember playing Half-Life with ladders and getting stuck on the ladder, not being able to get off.
Mhm.
Well, you get to the top, but you're like a couple of pixels still within the ladder collider, so you're still stuck to it. I think they solved that later on. I think you could actually jump off the thing, so you ended up just coming out of a hole going wee. It's a me.
I'll tell you one thing I'd be interested in your experiences with Payday 2 VR.
I would like to try that. I don't know whether my stomach would like to try that.
Well, that's the thing is how do they handle movement?
Hmm.
Like, is it just a joystick?
I'm presuming that I can just use the controller. That's one way of doing it. Or if you can actually use your hands, I need to watch some.
I believe you actually use your hands
Oh, okay.
because, like, the objective thing's on your wrist,
Then yeah.
and you've got your guns.
So there are a couple of different ways that you can control in VR, and some of them are more nauseating than others. And I must admit, when I'm playing sort of first person shooter style controls, it can get very nauseating very quickly. When I
I am.
played Rogue Squadron with it, that felt natural because I was in a seat, and I'm in a seat in the game, and I'm controlling using a controller, so it felt completely natural, and I could look around whilst I'm steering the ship. That was also a little bit nauseating, but nowhere near as much as first person.
Jelly points out it's funny the difference between games in VR and how they have different effects on the user. Yes, and I'm kind of fascinated by simulation sickness, motion sickness in games. Some people are really prone to it. My girlfriend has a lot of problems with certain games. I got
Sea
to
of
try such
Thieves.
art. Yes, I'm about to touch on Sea of Thieves. I got to try such art because I love such art. It's an amazing game, and I mean, it's sandbox pretending to be a game. Like no
Mm.
matter what you paint, they'll love it. So it's just have fun, and if you've got a tablet that'll work with it, even better. Um, but there's something about the field of view in that she can handle maybe 5 minutes.
Interesting.
So after you and I tried Sea of Thieves, and they spent so much time getting the water just right, she said, "That looks like fun. I'm going to try playing with you guys. Let me install it and try it out." She installed it, she tried it out, and then she had to switch off the computer and go throw up because they actually gave her seasickness, which she doesn't suffer in real life.
I will say that I've had a similar feeling. If I'm low down on the deck, it can be quite nauseating because they've simulated the sea very well. This is when I had my monitor at least another 6 inches closer, so it filled up a big field of view, and it wasn't seven. It was an ultra wide as well as being closer. And it definitely did make me feel a little bit queasy, not sick, but like a little bit uneasy. But the difference between being down on the deck and up in the crow's nest, that made all the difference. That's why I was always climbing up the crow's nest and staying there.
Yeah. I figured it was just because you didn't want to do any of the work. Wanted me to do it all for you.
Oh, I just found people to fire
Here's a
cannonballs at.
question: Sea of Thieves versus Atlas Water.
Sea of Thieves. I mean,
Makes them
I think it's
feels
six of
better or is more realistic?
I think it's six of one and half a dozen of the other because Atlas goes for a more realistic look.
My arthritis does not like me doing that. Um, but it's interesting. I'm gonna be fascinated to see how Payday 3 shapes out when they shift to a new engine. I know we've said this a couple of weeks running, but in terms of control and movement, how Unreal 4
Yeah,
changes that because I haven't played a lot in Unreal, but if they're doing it in 5, I thought they were doing it in 4.
I don't know. I thought it was
It's
5.
been in development for a couple of years. So.
Okay, you just click update project. Nothing ever goes wrong with that.
Oh yeah, that's always fun. Um, I have a feeling things like momentum and weight and you know field of view are going to be so much easier.
Yeah, I think when it comes to controlling a game like that, I think because it would never had the stealth built in from the very beginning, it was an add-on that it actually
It wasn't so
reflects
much an
that.
add-on; it was sort of an optional way you can play it. Like it was there from the start, but it was never the focus. The focus was objective-based shooter
I mean, let's face it, you can stand up, run past the guard, and they go,
with the right skills.
what was that?"
Yep. Um, in fact, that's the best way to do stealth in that game is to have no armor,
And peg it
max
around
out
everybody.
your concealment, and don't crawl everywhere. Just sprint from point to point.
Yeah, it's almost like an anti-stealth game because of the way you stack your deck and everything. Basically, that's something that it took me a while to understand with the game is the fact that it's like a not a real time RPG, but it has these RPG elements in it that actually dramatically affect how you play the game
Mm.
and whether or not people can see you, how accurate you are, and all of that. All
How accurate they are.
yeah, how big a dodge you have, and that took a while for me to grasp because in some ways it makes very little sense.
Now, if you want weird add-ons in that game, there are some missions where you have to drive
This sounds like an add-on.
using that engine.
Nice.
Very slidey.
That's fine. You power slide everywhere.
I mean, you kind of have to. There's very little feeling of a vehicle's torque. It just and we're off and we've stopped.
Oh dear. Well, I remember way back in the day playing Halo on a friend's Xbox because I never owned an Xbox at the time, and the Warthog, the Jeep thing there, that was so much fun to drive across the map. We used to just me and my friend used to sit down and we used to play. There was like a very long map with two towers either side, and there was a warthog that would spawn, and you just like drive around. But it was so
I
much
know.
fun, considering that vehicle isn't like the main part of that game. How well made and how well it felt to drive as well.
An interesting one for this is Elite Dangerous, which is a lot of fun to fly around in, especially if you've got a HOTAS system, handle, throttle, and stick, which is we've got the throttle on one hand and the movement on the other. And I had one for a while that had like 20 odd buttons on it. So I didn't have to use the keyboard at all, except to
Yeah,
chat to people. And in standard mode, you could just fly around the ring of a station, avoiding buildings just to practice. It was amazing. But you can enable Newtonian physics, and suddenly it's unflyable. Like there are a small handful of people who got good enough at Newtonian physics that they would just become YouTube celebrities because once you can master that, you're basically unstoppable.
well,
Because the ability to be flying in one direction, flip around, shoot everybody around you, and then keep going in that direction while dodging when you need to, like just keeping that kind of geometry in your mind was insane. But the control systems felt amazing.
I've played a couple of games that actually had proper physics built in. iWar, I think it was called, an iWar 2. They were very interesting.
Isn't
Interesting
that
space.
just like Apple's advertising program?
I think it was called. I mean, chat might be able to let me know if I've got that right. It was there was definitely. I think there was definitely a game called iWar, but it was very physically based. So you could do the things where you turn around. And the other one, what that I definitely did what you just described in, and it was my go-to thing, was Tachyon the Fringe.
Yep.
It was a game where you could just lock it in and just glide sideways past all the enemies.
I know what that
Brilliant.
weird game was with everyone in kinky scuba gear.
What was it?
Warframe.
Warframe. I don't know what Warframe is. I'm going to Google search it right now. It seems like a safe search. I've never seen this game because I'm a recluse. Okay. The main character is a hammerhead shark. Nice.
I just can't bring myself to want to play it because I just can't get into the aesthetic. Like I know a lot of people who adore this game. Um, just can't get into it. I'm glad we solved that. Now I don't sound so insane in this one field.
Okay, it wasn't iWar, it's Independence War. It was a Starship Simulator back in 97. But I think it might have been abbreviated to iWar at some point. I can't remember.
I mean, I remember the original Descent game, and I know they remade it. Well, I haven't played the remake. And the whole 6 degrees of movement, I would get lost, but a lot of people would get seasick.
I had great Descent and games like that. I mean, we're going back to Windows 95 at this point. A lot of fun. Yeah, iWar, it was definitely that. I just had a quick look. And it was really hard to control, as you've said.
Mm.
Because once you start thinking about, well, once you're going in a certain direction, that's it. That is the direction you're going until you do anything other.
I mean, this is kind of how Mag Racer played, right? Like,
Yeah.
once you internalized how the movement system worked, you could easily bank around corners and undertake and overtake NPCs with impunity. But to get to that point, you kind of had to unlearn everything video games have taught you about these things.
Yeah.
Because, and we didn't realize this till afterwards when we went back and watched Wipeout footage. We based it on what I could remember. Wipeout doesn't actually have you hovering over the track and dealing with all of that motion. Wipeout has you sit still on a line and you move where that line is. And it's very, very precise. So if we were
Yeah.
to redo that, and this isn't if, I'm not, this is a hypothetical. In Godot 4, we would have to go to the more traditional flight system because the difficulty curve is just too unforgiving. It's too niche a game otherwise.
Yeah. And I think niche is important if you're doing something that is new. If you're actually doing something,
Or if we want to play a competitive game that only Yann can win.
but if you're
Like, I
basing
think there's
something
room for that.
and people are going to look and go, "Oh, this is a modern version of insert name of game here," then they're going to expect it to play in a very similar way. I have a little bit of a paddy the moment that use isn't E anymore, but it is in some games. So F is now used in a lot of games, and
Why is E inventory in Minecraft?
I don't know, inventory. Perhaps someone couldn't
I
spell.
is good. Tab is fine.
That standards though, someone needs an extra thing to do and it changes. I think did Thief, the original Thief, have leaning left and right with Q and E? It's a very good question. Why is it used? So yeah, the not just how something controls, but actually fitting into a paradigm. Like if I was to make a first person shooter right now, I would use W, A, S, and D as the movement keys. You're almost shooting yourself in the foot if you don't pick up that control scheme.
I feel like shoot yourself in the foot should be the F key.
To pay respects, yes.
Yep. I'd be interested to see if you made a first-person shooter, how you would deal with things like inertia, slide, weight, acceleration,
I played a
when you can
fantastic
interrupt a
game.
motion.
I played a fantastic game recently that was it was really fast and frantic, and I can't remember the name of the game at the moment. Hi Daz. But it was very weird. I almost didn't play it because of its aesthetic. So it was I remember telling you about it. It was all magenta to begin with, and I was like, "Oh, this looks horrible. What's gone wrong with my graphics card?" was my first thought. It turned out it was fine. It was the aesthetic of the game. But after I started playing it, it was incredible because it had the right pace. It was very almost Doom Quake type speed where you're going around the level. So it wasn't methodical in thought. It was a very twitch, very high energy game.
So yeah, how we doing for time, by the way?
We are at 52 minutes at the moment.
We're at 52 minutes. I think we're approaching the point where people should let us know control systems that worked really well and really badly.
Yeah.
Because we kind of went on a little bit about why is this so slippy? Why is this so treacly or slow? But one more thing we should talk about is the bat bike,
Ba-da-ba-da-ba-da-ba-da-bam.
the bat cycle, the bat trike, which is a fun little thing that you can use. You tap up on the controller or whatever is in the keyboard, and the bike uncloaks next to you, where it's been secretly hovering around silently
Yeah.
like a stalker, and they could drive around. Mikey, what was your impression of it when you got on it in a tutorial?
It's slow. Even though they put so let's see if I can get it on camera. They've got these little sort of After Effect lines whizzing past you. I'm like, it's going like 20 miles an hour.
See, I'm wondering if it's slower in the tutorial.
Maybe, but it put me off using it.
Because there is this moment where you've got to press the wheelie button to go over an obstacle,
Yeah.
which doesn't happen anywhere else in the game.
That's useful to know, isn't it?
Right, like it just never happens. There is never a time where you have to do this, except possibly in one scene, which I hate, and I didn't do it. But I started a new game plus this morning, and the bike felt slower.
Interesting. So maybe it is the.
So I'm wondering if it's just okay. You're gonna get to use this, but to make it really easy, let's slow things down for you. But we'll keep the speed lines at the side.
Well, maybe that's why my opinion of it was because I was quite adamant. Yann was like, "No, I think you'll find the bike is quicker to get." I was like, "No, no, no. The bike is so slow. I know it's quicker to just rapple around the rapple around the
Gripple.
around the city."
I mean, groupling around the city is pretty fun.
Grouping. Yes.
That's what I'm going to call it now. I'm just going to give it groupling. Euro Truck Simulator 2, games that specifically design themselves for a specific controller. That does bite.
Well, it's very locked in at that point. So this is a genre of games I don't think I get. Euro Truck Simulator, like Farming Simulator and things like
I
that.
would say this, except for two exceptions.
What's that?
One of them is that janitorial simulator you and I have played. Whose
Yeah,
name escapes me.
yeah. Viscera Cleanup Duty.
Viscera Cleanup Duty, which is very fun to play multiplayer because the physics get in the way. But also solo is oddly satisfying if you put on a podcast.
Mm-hmm.
In a way that doing housework in your house isn't. And Elite Dangerous. I spent a lot of time just trucking things from one system to another, listening to audiobooks, just generally enjoying myself. Strip the shields off a large ship and just know that I can dock perfectly.
Yeah, I totally get it though, because whilst I like the idea of flight simulators, using Microsoft Flight Simulator to simulate a 5-hour flight over somewhere is not my idea of fun. Personally, it's just not.
It's not, but imagine in VR with this totally immersive cockpit. And now that ships have interiors and there are things like carriers, you can move around them while someone else drives the thing. Like there is something about it that just feels present.
Mm.
I'm trying to find the right word here. There's something compelling about it.
Lawnmower Simulator. Yes. And
Lawnmower Simulator.
don't you have to pressure wash people's driveways in there as well?
Pressure Wash Simulator. That's another one.
Oh, is it? Maybe I've mixed two up, or perhaps they were on a bundle deal. I don't know.
There's a whole bunch of these games that came out, and they all seem to be using. It looks like the Unreal Asset Store to me. I'm not sure.
Yeah, they're not for. I don't think they're for me. Perhaps I'm scared of they might be.
Jelly, I once decided I was going to go on a pilgrimage to Sagittarius A Star at Elite Dangerous. Okay, so Elite Dangerous uses our galaxy as much as possible, right?
Yeah.
And as exoplanets have been discovered, they've been added to the game,
Which is pretty cool.
It's pretty cool. Sagittarius A Star is the black hole in the center of our galaxy. It's quite far away. So I decided I was going to go on a pilgrimage to it. I wasn't just going to go on a pilgrimage. I was going to take tourists. So I went and found tourists who wanted to go. And the payout for this was insane. And I got myself a ship and I customized it as a passenger ship and I put in huge fuel tanks and fuel scoops and all the rest of it. However, in order to make this more efficient, I decided to go neutron star jumping. If you go into a neutron star and you just go along the magnetosphere, it supercharges your FTL drive to the point where you can jump twice as far. Get this wrong, and it does a lot of damage. So I got halfway there before I cracked the hull. The cracks are actually showing. I'm slowly leaking air.
You don't need air. It's fine.
Damaged my fuel scoop. Like the whole ship is falling apart. And I'm 250 light years from the nearest space station. That was terrifying. Elite Dangerous is a great game to play if you're not using a mouse and probably not a controller. If you have a good flight stick or a VR controller, I would recommend it. I know some people who've played Elite Dangerous in VR and they swear by it. I know people who played it with keyboard and mouse and they swear at it.
I've picked up Elite Dangerous ages and ages ago. It reminded me a lot of the X series.
It's more fair to say that X reminds people of Elite because Elite was the first game of its kind back in the 80s.
It's probably X. I think X2 was the one that I put a lot of time into. Speaking of which, X4 Foundations has just come up as it's sale by they're listening to me. They're listening. But yeah, when I played Elite Dangerous, I got so confused right at the very beginning because it was like throwing keyboard commands at me. I was like, no, my brain is not receptive to this.
Someone started making a mod where you'd have a ship computer that would figure out what you were doing and would add voice to it.
Okay.
So you could like look at a star and it would tell you the information about that star, what kind of star it was, what the local traffic was. And then they got this brilliant idea of hiring voice actors.
Oh dear.
So I got the one with the gentleman who played Holly from Red Dwarf. And it was amazing. I mean, obviously they couldn't call him Holly for copyright reasons, but it was literally, all right, dude. Yeah, getting ready for your FTL job now. You'll be fine. It was so good.
I might have to get it
There's
downloading and
also
installing.
what's his name, Spinner, who did Data, I believe it was. There's a few of the voices on there. They're so good that they've actually added some of the voice pack stuff to the actual game. Like it's no longer a mod. But yeah, that was good.
Yes, I do have it. I'm not gonna click
That
download
was
right
the
now.
best thing about the X Games for me was when you were flying
Yeah.
towards a station, the speech synthesizer would actually greet you with the correct information, welcome you to that named system, and tell you anything you needed to know. Like touches like that make games like that worthwhile.
I mean, it's interesting. So, two that I've been very interested in are Elite Dangerous and No Man's Sky. Not because they're the same game, but
At all.
not at all, but because of the I like space. And in fact, one of the
The one I can't bring myself to get excited for is Star Citizen.
no, I don't like the ethos of that people have spent tens of thousands of
I really
pounds.
don't like that. I don't like the feature creep. Some people love the game, and that's fine. From the
Oh
tech
yeah, but
demos I've seen, it
by
looks
all
very
means, if
impressive.
people want to
But
spend 15 grand
right.
on a game, that's their call. But at the same time, it's at a certain point, is this a long con sort of thing?
Well, just I mean, I have a friend who gets really into Star Citizen. He points out, but the ships will be purchasable with in-game money at release. Like, yeah, but if you spent $4,000 to buy a thing for you and your guild, there is no way I'm going to be anything like comparable to you on day one. And if I am, you've just wasted $4,000.
Mm.
So you are buying an advantage, and I don't like that.
It looks beautiful.
I mean, Elite Dangerous looks beautiful. That's one of the reasons I used to love doing sightseeing tours with NPCs, is because you'd find these incredible trinary star systems. And
I'm going to click install as soon as the stream's over.
speaking of, I should go have some dinner.
That sounds like a good plan. Before we go, though, does anybody have any questions, interpretive dances,
Oh, my
or
hoodie won't fit over my questions, concerns, comments, thoughts, interpretive dances, jingles.
$7.50?
Philosophies.
Yeah, I'd take a punt on most games for $7.50.
I don't want to get Warframe. Also, I want to say thank you to those people who reached out after my video from last week. It's very, very touching, and I am slowly getting around to saying thank you to everybody individually. It's a little slow because it always feels I don't know how to respond to people when they say, "Oh, that really touched me." It's like, thank you, but I am getting around to it.
Awesome. So I don't think there's going to be any other stuff coming in at the moment, but I would like to thank everybody for joining us this evening. It's been a
I
right
would love
blast, as
Yep.
always.
Oh, before we go,
Oh,
Mikey, as we talk about space games, who is your favorite Star Trek character?
um, um, Luke, one Canopy.
Very nice. I think mine is probably Worf.
Kapla!
Oh, the hate mail we're gonna get for that.
There you go, Adam. When you're putting the thumbnail together for at least one of these, you can do me doing that.
Cisco, good choice.
Yeah. Oh well. Yeah. As soon as someone starts asking about Star Trek, I always go to TNG. Barf. Barf. Thank you, everybody, and good
Thanks, everybody. And yeah, we'll see you.